1992, the U.S. government issued a doctrine that we should all be low fat or no fat, and within 10 years, rates of diabetes in America went up threefold. Doctors have been telling you for years that you've got to cut out the fat. Absolutely nonsense. I think you'd ask me off camera, well, what has changed in 2.5 years? I think that what's changed in my perception has been the incredible influence of the microbiome, this 3-pound organ that lives within us, that in terms of so many outcomes for health and risk for disease. Fantastic. For 99.9% of our time on this planet, we didn't have sources of carbohydrates. People say, well, give us this day our daily bread. It's in the Bible. We've always had bread. Not true.
So I'm here with Dr. David Perlmutter. It's been about 2.5 years since I was at your house in Florida.
My feet have never recovered. We ran barefoot.
And it was a really, really great honour to meet you then as it is now. And I'm so happy that I get the chance to talk to you again.
Me too.
And so I just want to recap and jog your memory what you actually said 2.5 years ago.
Oh gosh.
That's it, Olaf. Looking good.
Fat is your friend. You get into a state that's called ketosis.
Good. Keep it up.
Everything looks great, Olaf. Just keep pushing through.
Excellent.
You can take this to the bank. Olaf's going to validate the whole notion of a high-fat, low-carb, ketogenic type of diet.
In 1952, my grandfather qualified for the Olympic marathon. He did it in a time of 2 hours, 40 minutes and 41 seconds. Now, I'm on a quest to match his time and hopefully break it.
Now, back in 1992, the U.S. government issued a doctrine that we should all be low fat or no fat, and within 10 years, rates of diabetes in America went up threefold. Doctors have been telling you for years that you've got to cut out the fat. Absolutely nonsense. Olaf has adopted this incredibly powerful lifestyle and dietary program, really mimicking what humans have eaten for a couple million years. And when you look at the metrics, as demonstrated from his work up at the University of Florida, it's over-the-top breathtaking. He's got this incredible physiology now, really based upon this dietary shift away from carbohydrates and favoring dietary fat.
Everything lands or loads very nicely.
Very efficient running. Your metabolism looks great.
Okay.
3, 2, 1, and let's bring you down. Okay, he's hanging on. How hard were you working at? How hard were you?
Olaf has done a great job with his conditioning and his nutrition. Your maximum heart rate was 192. You've got perfect heart, no indication of any heart disease whatsoever.
You exceeded 70, which is quite astounding. That's fantastic.
For 99.9% of our time on this planet, we didn't have sources of carbohydrates. People say, well, give us this day our daily bread. It's in the Bible. We've always had bread. Not true.
What really surprised me is how long you were able to hang on to using fat for fuel.
We know that Olaf's eating a lot of eggs, 30 to 40 eggs per week. Eggs contain saturated fat. We've all been told to avoid saturated fat, and nothing could be worse for us. We desperately need saturated fat.
Thank you for watching my short film, and I'd really be excited if you could help me finish this project.
Take the sugars and carbs out of the human diet, revisit the idea that we need fat, and we'll once again experience good health.
You made the statements in there, fat is your friend, take the sugars and carbs out of human diet and we'll revert back to good health. It seems to me, after reading not only Grain Brain but Brain Maker and then attending your lectures here at the symposium, that low carb, high fat is still like the cornerstone of what you do?
It is, and I think that what we're leveraging now is not just the notion of lowering carbohydrates and simple sugars and adding in more fat, but the big thing we really need to push now is fiber, oddly enough.
Okay.
And you know, the average American consumes about 5 grams a day of prebiotic fiber. It's been estimated that our Paleolithic ancestors consumed as much as 125 grams a day. The reason that's important is because now we're talking about nurturing the gut bacteria. And that has really taken center stage. That, yeah, a higher fat diet, low carb is good for the diversity and the complexity of the gut bacteria, but that we've got to nurture them by giving them good levels of prebiotic fiber. And when you don't do that, even though you may be eating higher fat and you're in ketosis and keeping your carbs low, still you may start to gain weight despite how much exercise you do get or don't get. But if you don't pay a lot more attention to the microbiome, it'll still pave the way for not being able to realize your goals.
Okay. Chris, now I just want to tell you what's happened in those almost 2.5 years. Sure, obviously the movie was about running and trying to chase my grandfather's best time, but I realised soon after that long distance running was probably not a good healthy option to be engaged in, so I stopped, and that's why the movie never eventuated. But the thing that's happened in my physiology since has been quite astounding. I had a body composition done at the University of Florida, and I was just under 12% body fat. Just 7 days ago, I had another body composition scan, and I'm now 8% body fat. And basically the stat says I've lost 3 kilos of fat and gained 2 kilos of muscle. I'm starting to see that metabolism and now you and yours work on the gut biome is what we need to get in order.
Without
then
doubt.
we can become fit.
Yeah. Let me just take it back a few steps. And we are trying to emulate what our Paleolithic ancestors would have engaged in terms of their lifestyle choices, including diet and even their activity. Our Paleo ancestors didn't do a hell of a lot of work. They would, this notion of working from dawn until dusk in the fields, that's brand new with agriculture just 10,000 years ago. We spent a lot of time in our Paleolithic times not doing that much. Having a kill provided a lot of food, a lot of calories, a lot of fat, or finding a kill or finding food on the ground. So your body has undergone a dramatic change, having suddenly gone from one profound extreme training for this marathon to very little caloric expenditure at this point. And that's going to have a significant effect on your physiology, on your metabolism, but also it's going to change your microbiome. So high-level exercise leads to an adaptive change in the diversity of organisms that live within you. It's measurable. You can look at the microbiome through fecal analysis of high-level athletes during the times that they're vigorously engaged in exercise and during the times that they are not, and there are dramatic changes. The organisms and their diversity influence moment to moment the whether you extract more calories from food or you don't. So they are influenced strongly, obviously by your food choices, but but equally importantly by your level of activity. This is we're looking at outcomes based upon multiple influences, not just diet, not just exercise, but looking at these things through the lens of the microbiome, through the lens of the gut bacteria. I think you'd asked me off camera, well, what has changed in 2.5 years, and you actually mentioned on camera. I think that what's changed in my perception has been the incredible influence of the microbiome, this 3-pound organ that lives within us, in terms of so many outcomes for health and risk for disease.
Okay. So where does my experiment was sort of centered around being in ketosis and trying to maintain a high level, even to the level where therapeutic ketosis, having higher ketones and blood sugar. Where do you see ketosis or ketones specifically fit in with your gut biome?
And I mentioned in the previous section, and Olaf, I'm glad that you're here because it reminds me to mention this again. When we say when we say low carb diet, we're also saying in the same breath high fat. And the reason we're trying to push that is we're trying to push not just getting rid of the carbs to reduce glycation proteins, which, oh, I might add, glycated proteins also threaten the integrity of the epithelium, gut epithelium. But we're doing that to push her into a low grade of ketosis. You're familiar with that, ketogenic diet, which used to be reserved for children with intractable epilepsy. We're trying to increase the availability in her blood of something called beta-hydroxybutyrate, one of the keto acids that is used for beta oxidation as a fuel. Why? Because research shows that beta-hydroxybutyrate actually reduces the activity of what is called the inflammasome. The inflammasome is this collection of pathways whereby pathogen-associated microbial peptides and damage-associated microbial peptides stimulate those receptors, funnels through, turns on NF-κB, and explodes cytokines and inflammation in the body. That's downregulated dramatically by beta-hydroxybutyrate. Beta-hydroxybutyrate you're going to get when you cut your carbs, and in addition, amplify them by using sources of beta-hydroxybutyrate like coconut oil, which is the use of this pathway of coconut oil in neurologic conditions. In fact, that's just been recently published. If you're familiar with this research, right? Just published about 3,000 years ago in the Vedic text, talking about, did I talk about that earlier? No, all right. Well, anyway, so that's old news. Vitamin D probiotics. And
I think that it is one player, but I think that we have to look at not just one entry point. That's how modern medicine is practiced. You have a blood pressure problem and you're going to get one pill. One problem, one pill. It doesn't really, the body doesn't work that way. A person develops high blood pressure or coronary artery disease or diabetes because of multiple influences, and by the same token, to deal with physiology or aberrations of physiology, it needs a bigger approach, a more holistic body-wide approach. And I would say that being in mild ketosis does emulate to a significant degree what our Paleolithic ancestors must have been like. But beyond the fact that you've looked very specifically at carbs versus fat, you've got to now look at nurturing your microbiome. And that means the addition of adequate fermented foods teeming with good organisms, but more importantly, nurturing the good gut bacteria with higher levels, much higher levels of what is called prebiotic fiber.
Okay. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I've actually naturally gravitated towards that. Good. Without really
Isn't that incredible?
thinking, yeah. And less protein naturally.
Right.
Obviously I'm not doing as much damage, but still I was able to gain muscle.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, what's going on? There's something else going on here than just trying to build big muscles in the gym, which I now see is a totally different. Exercise is really just a stimulant.
Yeah.
Once you get everything else in order, would that be a fair?
Yeah, and I think in looking back, at the time you were training, you were probably extremely catabolic, and obviously, hopefully, because you were in ketosis, burning your caloric storage in the form of fat, but may have been degrading muscle as well through gluconeogenesis to create glucose for fueling your body during your extensive training. But I hope in 2.5 more years we get together again and see what is where your health has taken you. I think that you concentrated on a couple of important areas. Really, the most important being the shift away from carbohydrate as a dominant fuel source to allowing your body to naturally enter ketosis based upon your dietary choices. And now that we're looking at the idea of nurturing your microbiome, it's going to be very fascinating to see where that takes you.
Wow. When was it? How's your coffee, by the way?
Oh, my coffee is great. It has a little MCT oil in it, a little butter, and I'm feeling ketotic.
It's 2016. Here we are drinking coffee with MCT oil, which is pure fat. And it's sort of one of the taglines on my website is Beyond Fat Phobia,
yeah.
what I talk about. And I really enjoyed your talk yesterday, and you said, if you sort of mention this sort of that you're feeding your patients lots of fat, you might have pulled off the stage.
so she is sick, her belly is bloated. No doubt you might be thinking that she has SIBO, and you're probably right. We put her on a low carbohydrate, gluten-free diet with prebiotic fiber, as well as fermented foods. Let's go through it. When I say low carbohydrate, what does that also mean? it means high fat. I'm giving her lots and lots of fat. Now, there are a lot of medical venues these days, to this day, where if you say I loaded a patient up with fat, probably a hook would come out, they'd pop you off the stage. Because fat is, of course, though we've been eating it for over 2.5 million years, it's made up our primary source of calories, suddenly, in the last 2.5 decades, it has become the enemy of our health. What a perverse notion is that? It's crazy, but when you see low-carb diet, that means high fat. We're trying to nurture her microbiome, but beyond that, we're trying to nurture her. Hey, I could be wrong. You could be wrong.
Yeah.
But this isn't a short-term kind of history that we're looking at here. The test of the efficacy of a higher fat, lower carb diet in terms of human survival has been going on for over 2 million years. This is a long-term study.
Very good.
Great, Olaf.
Just one last question. I have an aunt with Alzheimer's. She's diagnosed about 5 years ago. I can't even get her to look at coconut oil or MCT. If you had to say one thing to her, what would that be to try and shift?
Aerobic exercise.
Right.
So we know that is what we call an epigenetic factor. It enhances the a transcription of a certain gene in the body that makes a chemical called BDNF that will actually regrow brain cells, especially in the memory center. So I'd like her to be low carb, get rid of the sugars and eat more fat, and add in some coconut oil or MCT oil. But I'd say, if not, at least 20 minutes of aerobics each day. Now, she doesn't have to get her heart rate up like you did, but we usually target, in a very gross way, a pulse rate of 180 minus a person's age. Great.
Fantastic.
All right,
Thanks
Olaf.
very much.
2.5 years we'll get together.
Yeah, for
All
sure.
right.
Thank
You're
you
the
very much
best.
for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
This one's mine.